Hello and welcome to another episode of Entry Level Esports. I'm your host Trent, and today we're going to talk about one of the topics in Heroes of the Storm that is most near and dear to my heart. It is the absolute necessity of adding a third ban to the draft process. We're going to talk about it in a little bit different way. People have asked for written companion pieces to the YouTube shows, and frankly, I've written the best article that I'm going to ever write about the need for three bans. It's already up on Heroes Hearth. It'll be in the description for this video. It includes an interview with Bakery that talks very specifically about what we're going to talk about today. So I think that that's the best thing that I would direct you to if you don't want to watch any more of the video and you'd rather read my thoughts on why this needs to happen, and Bakery's thoughts on why today's topic is basically just not relevant or accurate in any way, shape, or form. And what we're going to talk about today is this constant criticism that we hear anytime the subject of a third ban comes up, and it's the reason that Blizzard has given for why a third ban has not happened yet in Heroes of the Storm, and it's that there just aren't enough supports in the game yet to be able to bring in a third ban, because then if all three bans go to supports, you won't have enough supports for each team to pick from, and it's going to create a really bad environment where people are just over prioritizing supports in the draft, and it just ruins the entire ecosystem of drafting in Heroes. So you can't add a third ban until there's more supports. So today I want to explain in detail why that just isn't true, and why even if it was, it wouldn't matter. So what we're going to do first is we're going to look at all of the possible viable supports in today's metagame. And for this video, we're going to focus specifically on the supports that are HGC viable, because there's going to be a more restricted pool of supports in the pro scene than there will be in your Hero League or unranked draft matches, because in those situations, player skill at a hero matters dramatically more than necessarily the most optimal meta pick. You know, you can have a Lily who absolutely carries your team as a solo support if your team plays around it and the enemy team doesn't respect it properly in Hero League. You can have a solo Anna more commonly in more situations than you can in pro play, because players don't know how to play around those things and counter those strategies as effectively. So we're going to focus on the supports that are HGC viable. And just looking at the list of overall supports, we've got as solo supports that have been played in HGC, we've had Alexstrasza, Lucio, Malfurion, Rhaegar, Stukov, Uther, and we've seen Anna as a solo support, though it hasn't had quite the degree of success, and it's a bit more of a situational pick. Then if you get into double support comps, it opens up the support pool even further with Brightwing, Tassadar, Medic, Monk. We've even seen Monk run in solo support compositions. You can run Anna more consistently in those compositions. And in double support situations, Medivh suddenly becomes a genuine support that you can pick as not a specialist, but as an actual dedicated support, as long as you have a secondary healer backing him up. So what we see from just looking at this quick list is that even with 6 bans, you still, both teams have supports to choose from that they can make work in HGC viable compositions. So even if you restricted and both teams banned 6 supports, you would still have the opportunity to pick HGC viable supports. The myth of there not being enough supports in the game is just flat out not true. Mathematically, there are more than 6 supports, there's more than 8 supports, and there are more than 8 supports that are viable in competitive top-level games. So right there, we know that that just isn't true. There are plenty of supports. You can pick them. You might have to think a tiny bit about how you draft if 6 supports get banned, But we'll also talk a bit in a second about why the notion of banning 6 supports is just completely ludicrous anyway. The other side of the coin that sometimes people will bring up is, okay, if there are plenty of supports, there definitely aren't enough tanks. We've got so few tanks in the game. We've got tons of warriors, but so few actual tanks that if we'd have the exact same problem. There'd be 6 tank bans, and then both teams wouldn't get a tank, and whichever team got the better tank just wins. But if we look at the numbers again, that's just not true. HTC viable tanks have included Anubarak, Arthas, Blaze, Diablo, ETC, Garrosh, Muradin, Tyrael, and Stitches. And in previous metas, we've seen Leoric as a viable solo tank. We've also seen Johanna work, even though I don't really consider her a good tank, but teams pick her plenty and are free to do so. They can live their lives however wrong they want to. But so there's plenty of tanks in the game, even if all of the bruisers never get reworked into tanks. There's way more than 6 tanks. There's way more than 8 tanks. And this doesn't even factor in all of the double tank compositions that you can run, which open up more possibilities to more situational tanks in the future. Now, admittedly, the tank pool is a bit lower. If you had somebody ban Anubarak, Arthas, Blaze, Diablo, ETC, Garrosh, it really does hurt the pool, but it still gives teams access to Muradin, Tyrael, and Stitches, and Johanna. So there's still plenty of viable options that are strong that you can pick in your composition. Now, the next part that we need to realize is just how ridiculous the concept of choking out supports or tanks is. In the way that Heroes of the Storm has set up its drafting process, you literally can't choke out tanks and supports. It's just not possible because HGC uses a mid-ban drafting process, as do Hero League and Unranked Draft. What this means is that even if Heroes of the Storm adds a third ban to both sides in the first phase, you're still only banning 4 total heroes before you get to picks. So that means that even if you ban Anubarak, Arthas, Blaze, Diablo, ETC is still available as a first pick for one of the 2 teams. What this means is that if ETC is the best tank in the game and you leave him open, or let's say that Diablo is a really strong tank and there's only 5 really, really strong tanks, if you ban 4 of them, whoever has first pick now immediately has the advantage on tank pool because they get first pick before the rest of the bans come through. So it's actually in the other team's best interest to only ban 1 tank and leave up several other options so that there are more potential strong tanks for them to pick. In League of Legends, this was a very common strategy that teams had to employ in the drafting process because all of the bans take place at first. And often what you would see is rather than banning 6 overpowered heroes, the first pick team would ban 3 overpowered heroes, but the second pick team would ban 1 overpowered hero and then 2 target picks because they wanted to leave up at least enough overpowered heroes so that when the first pick team first picked something overpowered, they would still have 2 really strong heroes to choose from on their side. If they just banned straight down the list of as many overpowered heroes as possible, then the first pick team would get the best overpowered pick, and then the second pick team would be left with 2 less powerful choices. So in banning, the second pick team is actually incentivized to not choke on picks as much because it actually ends up hurting them more than it hurts their opponent. So not only does the math work out to where it just makes no sense not to have a third ban, but common logical drafting strategy dictates that you just never would actually see a choke happen because it would actually hurt one of the teams participating in the choke. Because with so many supports and tanks in the game at this point, the only way for a choke to actually happen is for both teams to commit to it. And in Heroes of the Storm, that would mean, if we go back to our supports example, both teams would have to ban 4 supports in the early drafting ban phase. Neither team could pick a support in the first wave of the draft. So first pick would have to let 3 picks go, taking tanks, assassins, whatever, but leaving supports open. Second pick would have to pick 2 heroes without picking a support. Then both teams would have to use their second ban on a support. And then both teams would have to pick supports with their last possible picks. That is such an unrealistic scenario that it's just never going to happen. If one team recognizes that a choke is happening, they're going to pick something that's being choked out within that first wave of picks. So because of this mid-ban, it's impossible for a choke to actually happen for any team that's actually paying attention. And then even if it does happen, you still have to factor in player skill when you get down to Hero League and Unranked Draft. Even if you ban out 6 of the strongest supports, the support player on your team in an Unranked Draft might just be the best medic player and suck at all of the supports that you banned, and so your bans were completely wasted because they were going to pick medic anyway. There's no way for you to actually choke someone out in Hero League or Unranked Draft because you don't know what their priority on heroes is and how deep their hero pool in supports or tanks actually goes. So, based on this, there's just no way for a genuine support or tank choke to happen at this point in Heroes of the Storm's life cycle. And it's been this way for months. And quite frankly, Blizzard had no excuse to not add a third ban to the drafting process at the start of this year, before the HGC season began. Because now it's too late. They have to wait until after Midseason Brawl, or potentially all the way until after BlizzCon, because of how dramatically adding a ban is going to shake up the competitive meta. So they've put themselves behind in something that absolutely needs to happen for the quality of the game. Again, to see my thoughts on why that's the case, check out the Heroes Hearth article linked in the description below. But I hope this once and for all dispels all of the rumors and myths about the dangers of chokes. This is even less possible with assassins or with bruisers or with any other position in Heroes of the Storm. It's just not possible to actually create a realistic choke. So the next time that the subject of a third ban comes up and you see someone on Reddit comment about it, how it can't happen until there's more supports or tanks in the game, just link them this video and they will realize why they have been wrong for so long. So that's all we have for today. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Entry Level Esports. If you have any feedback for the show, be sure to follow at TrollsGG on Twitter and myself at Trent_Esports. We do read all of the comments and all of the feedback we get on the show. And be sure to keep an eye on this YouTube channel and subscribe so that you don't miss next week's episode, so that you can gain even more wonderful esports knowledge to become smarter than all of your friends.